Welcome everybody to the Trinity Outreach Corporation's I Was Here Youth Institute program. Today we'll have a roundtable discussion with my fellow counterparts here to discuss some of the issues that we encounter as minorities or African American men considering institutional racism. So I want to be careful to note that this conversation is not to demean or degrade or to be racist toward any other culture, but more so to engage in the iniquities that minorities or African American men face with social issues, academic issues, and economic issues. So we have a couple topics that we're going to address and we're going to discuss them. So before we get started, I'd like to go around and have everyone to introduce themselves to you, starting with Pastor Brown here.
My name is Pastor Tarvis Brown, pastor of the Bridge International, Pascagoula, Mississippi, and also the founder director of the Bridge of Hope Foundation, also located in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Very glad to be here today.
Thanks for coming.
Tabari Daniels, broadcaster, entrepreneur. Of course, we're having it here at the beautiful Almanac Hotel and Bistro.
Very beautiful Almanac.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Shameless plug.
Thanks for coming.
And father.
Right.
Yeah. Keith Brown, owner of Omni Wireless, entrepreneur.
So again, I'm glad to have you guys to be a part of this panel. So we're gonna get right into it. First, how would you guys define race?
When it comes to race, unfortunately, America has this idea of race as first thing they see. People tend to look at you and categorize you immediately just because of how dark you are, how light you are. So I think that's one of the biggest problems as African Americans. We have a problem defining ourselves because too many times we're trying to define ourselves in a way that doesn't insult any other ethnic group. And once we come off to the point where we're defining ourselves as being African American or being black, then unfortunately it rubs people in some ways to where, oh, well, if you're black, then you're into hip hop. Or if you're black, then that means you're from a low level neighborhood. If you're black, you're from the projects. If you're black, there's certain things I can't say to Tyrone. So I think when defining race, you really walk that tricky tightrope, of if you're going to be scientific about it, or if you're going to be more what everybody else is calling black, or so I think for me defining race has more to do with my ancestry, who my parents are, and what I've been taught, how they define it for me. So for me, African American, black, Negro, all that.
Right. So Keith, do you think that race does it influence the way that we view each other?
Well, first I wanna weigh in on what is race.
Okay.
We are all black, white, Asian, whatever. We're supposed to be. Race is a biological or scientific term.
Right.
That's what it's originated from.
Mm-hmm.
We are Homo sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
We are animals just like a dog is an animal.
Right.
We're Homo sapiens, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's what race is supposed to be. All of this other stuff comes down after that. When you go back to it, we're Homo sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
And now all this black and African American, all these things came after that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody might not want to get into this, but you are and I am the same thing that white guy is, that Asian guy is, that Native American is. And I think that's where you should start at when you say what is race.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. So again, I'll ask you, so how do you think race influence, or how do you think the perception of race influence the way that people respond to us? You kind of hit on that a little bit, or that we respond to each other. Do you think that we respond to each other in a certain kind of way, considering what we look like?
No doubt. Right or wrong, it is what it is.
So what's in right now, light skin or dark skin?
Very good question. Of course, I'm gonna say brown skin. But yeah, that picture. If you flash a picture, whatever whatever race or species or whatever ethnic group you think, and that's what race has become now. Race is, it don't, nobody goes back. And if we're talking about youth and something for youth, we need to take them there. We need to take them to the fact that race and ethnic group is two different things. You know what I'm saying? That's where the conversation has to start. Now it's all about ethnic group. We've been everybody want to separate themselves and their culture and do that, and that's fine. But because of that, we've gotten away from what race is, and we've got your ethnic group is that's who you are, that's what it is, and we're not the same. Right. It's like we're all human beings, right, as a race. But now your ethnic group takes precedent over that. Yeah.
That's also too to what you were saying, and also to get back on this point. I think the problem is, unfortunately, racism and prejudice go hand in hand. We tend to prejudge based off of what we see, even when it's not so much as when we're not talking race, we're talking about just because you got your pants sack and all of a sudden I prejudged you, right, or because you got dreads, I'm going to prejudge you, or because you got gold teeth, now I'm prejudging you. So one of the easiest ways to prejudge when you can't go off of fashion, you can't go off of a lifestyle, is, okay, what does he look like? Right. Now, since he looks black, now unfortunately, because you're black, it has such a negative connotation. Right. I think that is one of the biggest problems. Right. We have to stop getting to the point where we're allowing black to be associated with negativity. Just because you're black doesn't mean you automatically don't have money. Right. Just because you're black doesn't mean you're not intelligent. Right. Just because you're black doesn't mean that you can't have an intelligent conversation with somebody, or you can't appreciate some of the things that your white counterparts can appreciate.
That's great.
So I think that we have to stop prejudging based on the visual, based off of, just because I see you or him doesn't mean that, okay, all the negative connotation.
Right. And hitting on the topic, institutionalize. Do you think that is one of the things that has been institutionalized for so long, to the point in which immediately when somebody see that, it takes us back to when it was not accepted, or it takes us back, or it takes that person back to the point in which if you don't look like this, then we can't respect you as such. So that's kind of playing to this whole institutional thing. And I do think that it's sad. But then we had a conversation yesterday, and I have to bring this up, about Adrian Broner.
Who?
The boxer, Adrian Broner,
okay.
Floyd Mayweather's little protege. And one of my good friends voiced the fact that this young man is a 23-year-old young man that is 27-0, 22 knockouts. You know, he probably got a couple $1 million in the bank. So why should we focus so much on the fact that when he gets in the ring, he does the Dougie and he dances, and he acknowledges the fact that he just got his gold teeth in his mouth and he has on 5 gold chains, instead of just saying he knocking people out, he's winning, he's a champion. Where in my personal opinion, when I looked at that, even though I don't mind someone having a gold chain, I don't mind somebody wearing gold teeth or dancing, but to me it's kind of considering time and place. So I think I like to throw this out there at this point, that we're not saying that we don't necessarily harm ourselves in some of these ways. Should we ask the question if that is an institutionalized way of thinking upon ourselves? Maybe. But at the same time, we've had so many other examples to say that when we get in certain arenas, considering time and place, that maybe we should handle ourselves accordingly in a professional demeanor. So, you know, I was just taking that as far as saying sometimes with the dreadlocks or with the way that we dress, yes, that has been institutionalized over years, but at the same time, sometimes we can ask for stuff that we don't really want no parts of, considering time and place. So, want to get you involved too, because I know I just met you today, but we'll talk. Yeah, we will definitely talk. So, how do you define structural racism?
Structural racism It's one of these things that is yet still being defined. Have to piggyback off of Mr. Brown here to say we have to go back to the basics to really define who we are as it relates to race. It was Thomas Jefferson who helped destructure racism in the 17th century when he and Carlos Linnaeus began to say that we as black people were inferior to white people, that our group of people were basically undereducated, not capable of learning, and that we were wild and savage, and we had appetites for white women that were unnatural. And so the stereotypes begin before now. We're trying to discuss and talk about something today that we got to go back a little bit further to find out the origin and the root of it. And so what's happened is, if I would give it a new term, it's relevant racism today. It's not that it has ever gone away. So we're not dealing with slaves and slave owners anymore today, but we're dealing with things like you just stated, with now having to redefine ourselves when somebody want to take a position that could be very influential and present it as such, and then we're stereotyped from that particular point that all black folks like gold and all black folks like, you know what I'm saying? And I don't have the solution to how we're going to separate choice behaviors and dress codes that doesn't define the whole group of people, but it's an issue that's at the table that we need to talk about. But structural racism, let's deal with that. Like, one of my issues is this new thing called ADHD. And so we got policies and procedures that really target, and that's what structural racism does, is targets a group of people by making another group of people feel protected while another group of people go unprotected. So you got your Trayvon Martin situation, and I'll deal with ADHD and we'll jump back on the Trayvon Martin situation. ADHD, when you look at that, 75% teachers are female, and then 85% of them are white female. What are they gonna understand about a black male? And so you have some that's coming forth saying, I have to admit, from where these kids' backgrounds are, how they're being trained, and what their values are different from mine, so I don't know how to deal with them. And so we call them problematic, and we put them on medication, which has all kinds of effects that's going to, pretty much devastate our group of people if we don't get a handle on this, when it's not necessarily that, that our kids are having issues that need to be put in special ed classes and on medications, just because somebody don't understand the background of where they come from. So that's a form of structural racism. And then with the Trayvon, Martin, you got Florida, Stand Your Ground law. Well, who was that? What was that law designed to do? You understand what I'm saying? Who's going to be actually the most target of the Stand Your Ground law? When you got people, like I said, that is targeted to protect, then it's got people that is targeted to profile. And so those are some examples of structural racism that is very, very prevalent today in our society.
And I'll even hit on within schools and just within the way that subject matters are taught. I think that considering some of the things that African Americans deal with outside of the classroom, I even think the approach to teaching the lessons should kind of be, modified, for the lack of better words. I mean, you got kids that when they leave, they have to deal with all kind of stuff at home. Parents maybe being on drugs, parents not being at home, kids in the neighborhood selling drugs, or just no structure at all. So when that kid comes into that classroom, what are they really thinking about? Are they really interested in reading, this, or being talked at? And if you see that kid isn't necessarily being reached, what are we actively doing to try to, to try to reach those kids? And it's not a Mississippi thing, it's a worldwide issue. You know what I mean? So I think that's definitely, a structural or institutionalized thing.
The only thing I would say with that is, as far as, I wouldn't see how that would be, I'm not disagreeing per se, but as far as, that's not just for African American kids.
Right. No, it's not. It's not.
We're talking also Caucasian kids have to deal with the drug problem as well as Hispanic. Right. So I think just to your point, I do agree there is a way that you have to approach some of the kids in those deteriorating home situations, but I would hate for people to assume that it's just in those ethnic places, just in African American households,
And it's not.
just in Latin American
I will
households.
acknowledge that it isn't.
Our education system. I mean, it's not just black kids that's getting behind. Like America's education system as a whole is falling behind. I can talk about that forever. One of the reasons is like, this is the example that I used in that Mississippi, because I'm from Mississippi, needs to get into, and the rest of the United States can get on later. But video games, a kid that's 3, 4, when he gets a video game, right? The first time that he can figure out when he moves this button right here, the little thing on the TV moves, that is fascinating. And like graphics in the US, the best graphics that comes out, they're gonna be on those video games first. You see movies, big production movies, do that stuff that's on those games later, on the video games first. So at 3, he picks up a video game. 4, he picks up a video game. Now, and he's bombarded, his brain is bombarded with the best graphics in the world. And now when he gets 6, you want him to go in first grade and sit in class and listen to this lady do this. After 10 minutes, that is out the window. You know what they call it? ADHD. Well, they wasn't diagnosing my mom and your mom then with ADHD.
So at all, right? Yeah.
This is a what? I'm gonna say 20-year phenomenon now. It's everybody got ADHD.
Right.
No, you need to change what you do in the classroom. And that's not a racist. That's across the board.
Right.
That's across the board.
I agree that it's across the board, but the statistics of our African American boys is rising
It's
really
more.
high
It's
to be
more.
on the meds before, you know. And to be honest, I was sitting in my psychology class, and my psychology teacher, who professed that her daughter actually had ADHD, but like most of them, and let's look at some things now. When in an African American situation, from African American home, we're talking about welfare, we're talking about subsidized housing, and we're talking about checks. So many of our African American people that are having babies are younger, starting out now. And so they're not seeing the depth of what this is doing. They're seeing a quick check. And so we're supported, and we're being offered, they're gonna focus, they're gonna do this, and we're not being educated like we need to, what the ramifications are going to be in the long run. Whereas my Caucasian teacher said, we're going to have to get through this a better way. There's not to be no way that I'm going to let them medicate you for this. We're going to have to find a way to get through this. Most of ours are uneducated. We just was told, got to know, hey, they're going to be, and that's what's happening. You see what I'm saying? So that's what's bringing my concern when it comes to the African American community. Not to say that it's not all across the board, because I believe it is.
Yeah.
But again, structural racism, again, you have teachers that are saying, you know, because I believe in, you said change the classroom, and I also remember there was a time when we were disciplined.
Right.
Yeah.
And nobody's disciplining anybody. We don't have any, you know, we had time out time just because. And I believe now that as I get older, that's so I can know the difference between when and when not. There's no structure even home-wise, you know, versus school, you know, and that's a whole different ball game as well, you know, but they're taking
talk about that,
okay,
though.
but they're
Very
taking
important.
opportunities to put them in another category again. I mean, I've seen a man, it's zombies. And then they get to start telling you, I hadn't had my medicine today. 3, 5, 6, 7 years old, hadn't had my medicine today. Zonked out. Headaches, cause vomiting, cause mood swings. How could this be helping anything when it's creating something? And then statistically long run, because of our pharmaceutical drugs, we open up the possibilities for alcohol, we open up the possibility for crack cocaine and all these things, and somebody got to do something and say something about
Now
that.
there's an example of institutional racism. Crack law.
That's a good one.
Crack law.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
Crack law. I think the numbers now are closer to. Here's my whole spiel on the crack law thing.
I love this. Right.
Crack comes from powdered cocaine. Crack is cooked powder cocaine. the penalties are 100 times worse for crack cocaine than it is for powdered cocaine. And they say it's because they want to stop crack because it's horrible. If you want to stop a derivative of something, then you stop the base, the source. So are you really trying to stop cocaine in any form?
Yeah.
And it all goes back to one thing to me. And it is what it is. Your opinion, my opinion, your opinion is based on our walk in life. You know what I mean? To me. So we don't make the laws, politicians do. Okay? So when you look at the diversification of the lawmakers, what do you see? Now, would crack cocaine be more used amongst those people, or would powder cocaine be most used amongst those people? Strictly talking about the people that make the laws now. So they're lenient toward what they can relate to. But more whites use crack than black. It's just more blacks are prosecuted. The numbers are there. The numbers are there. And if you really trying to stop it, then why isn't it the same or worse for cocaine? Because they don't fly crack over. They don't fly crack over to the country. They fly powder over to the country. And blacks and Hispanics have an overwhelming majority of prosecutions for crack. That's institutional racism.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how the crack ever surfaced, because I think back in the late 60s, early 70s, when this cocaine phenomenon hit the United States, it was so expensive that blacks couldn't afford it anyway. So if it's something that's expensive and I can't afford it, when I do get my hands on it, am I really gonna experiment with this to try to make some crack? No. So when it was made, is even that step further how it's very interesting that it found its way into the lower income communities, some kind of a way. Now, when I was a young guy, I'm still kind of young, but when I was a younger guy, when I was younger, I used to hear people say that the government was responsible for bringing drugs to the United States. And again, rationalizing that as, a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, it didn't make sense to me. You got to tell me more than that. We don't condone Kanye West saying President Bush don't like black people. Like, you got to say more than just that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But once I did find out about the Iran-Contra and Oliver North, and how even what we know in the hip hop community as Free Ray Ricky Ross, but just how he was a pawn in this huge game. Yeah. That's when I really raised the eyebrow and was like, wow, you really have no idea. So you bring it in, you create this beast, and then you turn around and, like you just said, heavily prosecute it for something that you really kind of brought in. Yeah. Now, what we have to say again, because we're not blaming, it is what it is. We're not placing blame saying it's all your fault. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you put the crack pipe to your mouth.
That's right. At the end of the day, you did.
Right. You put the crack pipe to your mouth. Yeah. But what we are saying is recognize that from now on, that just because something is laid out to you on a plateau, if it sound like a duck and quack like a duck, it's a duck.
It's a duck.
So, and then when they had the DVD Crackheads Gone Wild a couple years back, what fascinated me the most about that simply was I just wanted to see what everybody was talking about. Yeah. So that's why you tried crack, because you saw this person over here strung out and you wanted to see.
Yeah. Right. And I guess the interesting part for me too is in our communities, as we relate to crack, is I can receive a greater penalty or charge prosecuted for crack possession more so than what I can for murder. Right. I can take your life and get a less sentence, but I can sell you crack and get a greater sentence. Right. Something's really wrong with that picture. So, and it's some things, and like you said, I'm by no way discriminatory, I guess, and trying to discriminate between, this skin or that skin. I think all of us have a responsibility when it's all laid out, but we need to, who's making laws. We need to be concerned with that, and then that goes back to the responsibility of the citizens. We need to get to the polls and make sure that we're voicing our opinions, because we can't talk about this if we're not, key players when it comes to this. We're not voting
To the decision making time.
That's at the end of the day. You need to understand what your politicians stand for, what they believe, and why they're in office, and are they going to represent the future or the moving forward of this country or your state, your city, or whatever you got, going on. So we're responsible. There's a level of responsibility.
I think that's a good place to stop for this first 30-minute segment. This is the Trinity Outreach Corporation's I Was Here Youth Program panel discussion. For more information, visit us at iwasheretldI.org, and you can call us at 228-596-1467.